My husband had been gone for 3 years, but that night he came back. Not in body, in a dream so vivid I could smell his cologne, the same one he always wore before bed. He stood at the foot of my bed, half shadowed by moonlight, his face tight with worry, and he said just one word: "Run." I woke up gasping. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might burst. For a long time, I sat there, clutching the blanket to my chest, staring at the empty space where Rick used to sleep. The air felt different, thick, heavy, almost like the room itself was trying to tell me something. At first, I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just a dream, the kind you have when grief still hides in your bones. But something in his voice, something real, stayed with me. Run. He'd never sounded so afraid before. I looked around my room. Everything was still. The soft hum of the heater, the faint creak of the old house, and the quiet sound of wind outside. It was almost peaceful. Almost. Because deep inside me, a feeling started to grow. A strange, uneasy dread. That house had been our home for more than 40 years. Rick built most of it himself. The porch, the stairs, even the bookcases that lined the living room walls. After he passed, I tried to keep it alive the way he would have. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table, his favorite chair never moved, the smell of coffee in the morning. But things had changed after my son Brandon and his wife Ashley moved in. At first, it seemed like a good idea. They said they wanted to help me, to make sure I wasn't alone. I believed them. Because that's what mothers do. We believe our children when they say they love us. But love can change shape when you're not looking. When they first moved in, the house was filled with laughter. Brandon would tease me about watching old TV shows. Ashley would bring home new recipes to try, and I'd sit at the table feeling like maybe, just maybe, I was needed again. Rick would have liked that. He always wanted a noisy house. He used to say, "Silence makes the walls grow old." But slowly, that laughter started to fade. At first, it was small things. Ashley started closing my kitchen cupboards differently, tighter, faster, like she was annoyed. She'd correct me when I spoke, or sigh whenever I asked a question. I brushed it off. Maybe she was just tired. Work, stress, life. But then came the whispers. Late at night, when they thought I was asleep, I'd hear them talking behind my door. "She can't stay forever," Ashley said once. "She's your mother," Brandon whispered back. "Exactly. Your mother, not mine." Her voice cut through me like glass. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and stared at the ceiling. Pretended I didn't hear. Pretended it didn't matter. But it did. The next morning, Ashley smiled at me like nothing had happened. She poured me coffee, asked how I slept. I smiled back. Because that's what you do when you don't want to lose the people you love. You pretend everything's fine. But I started noticing more. The way she'd whisper on the phone when I walked in, the letters that came in the mail with my name, but were opened before I saw them. The times Brandon would leave the room when I asked about bills. It wasn't just tension anymore. It was secrets. And somewhere deep inside me, that night in my dream, Rick must have known what was coming. A week before the dream, I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my neighbor, Linda. She'd come over with her usual batch of oatmeal cookies. She was one of those people who always knew when something was wrong. She looked at me over her glasses and said, "Karen, you look tired. Everything okay with the kids?" I smiled, but I think she saw the truth behind it. "Of course," I said softly. "They're just busy. It's different having them here, but it's nice not to be alone." Linda nodded, then placed her hand over mine. "Just remember, dear," she said gently, "kindness should never make you feel small." Those words stuck with me. I didn't fully understand them then, but I would later. That night, the night Rick came to me, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Brandon and Ashley had gone to bed early. The lights in the hallway were off. The only sound was the wind brushing against the windows. I remember the clock ticking, each second louder than the one before. Then, sometime after midnight, I woke up, cold. So cold, it hurt. That's when I saw him. Rick. He wasn't glowing or floating like you see in movies. He just stood there. Solid. Familiar. Real. He looked at me the way he used to when something was wrong. His brow furrowed, his lips pressed tight. And then softly, his voice filled the room. "Run!" Just that. One word. It wasn't angry. It wasn't kind. It was desperate. When I tried to speak, my throat felt like it was frozen shut. I reached for him, but my hand passed through air. He started to fade, but before he disappeared completely, I saw something. A flicker of orange light behind him, like fire dancing in the dark. And then he was gone. I didn't think, I just moved. I threw on my coat over my nightgown, grabbed my phone, and walked straight to the front door. The air outside was freezing. It cut through me like knives. I didn't even put on shoes. I just ran. Down the driveway, across the street, into the empty darkness. My breath came out in white clouds. My feet slapped against the cold pavement. I ran until I couldn't feel my legs, until I couldn't see the house anymore. When I finally stopped, I was sitting on a bench near the old bus stop, gasping, shivering, crying. I didn't even know why I was crying. I just knew something terrible was coming. The next 3 days are blurry in my memory. I stayed at Grace's place. She was an old friend who lived 2 towns over. She didn't ask questions, and I didn't give answers. She made me tea, wrapped me in a blanket, and said, "You can stay as long as you need." I didn't tell her about the dream. I didn't tell her about Rick. I didn't tell her that every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear him saying that word, run. But on the 3rd day, something inside me said it was time to go home. I thought maybe I overreacted. Maybe grief had gotten the better of me. Maybe I owed Ashley and Brandon an apology for disappearing like that. I was wrong. When I got back to our street, the air smelled like smoke. Thick, heavy, bitter smoke. At first, I thought someone nearby was burning leaves, but as I got closer, I saw people standing in the road. police tape, fire trucks. And then I saw it. Our house. Or what was left of it. A black skeleton of wood and ash, smoke still rising in thin ghostly ribbons into the gray sky. I froze. The world went silent. No voices, no sirens, nothing. Just the crackle of cooling embers. I dropped my bag. My knees buckled. Someone caught me. A police officer, maybe? I can't remember his face. All I remember is looking at what used to be my home and whispering, "Rick." Because I knew. He hadn't come to haunt me. He'd come to save me. That's how it began. The dream, the escape, the fire. But what I didn't know then, what would take me months to uncover, was that the fire wasn't an accident. It wasn't fate. It wasn't bad wiring or a candle left burning. Someone had planned it. And that someone lived under my roof. When the fire department finally let me near the house, all that was left was smoke, ash, and memories. They said it started in the basement. That's what they always say when they can't find the real reason. But something inside me, something I can't explain, told me it wasn't just an accident. It wasn't faulty wiring. It wasn't bad luck. It was intentional. I stayed with my neighbor Linda for the first few nights after the fire. Her guest room smelled of lavender and old books, and for the first time in days I could sleep without hearing sirens. Linda made me tea every morning and spoke softly, like she was afraid I might break. "Do they know what happened yet?" she asked one morning, setting a cup in front of me. I shook my head. "They're still investigating. They said it'll take time." She sighed and sat down across from me. "What about Brandon and Ashley?" I looked down. The tea was too hot to drink. "They weren't there that night," I said quietly. "They were at a friend's house, apparently." Linda frowned. "Apparently?" I nodded. "They said they decided to stay over after a dinner party. I didn't even know they were going." It was strange, the way my son sounded so calm when he told me that on the phone. No panic, no fear, just quiet surprise, like it was convenient that they weren't there. The next few weeks blurred together. Insurance meetings, fire reports, police interviews. The words all started to sound the same. Electrical failure, smoke inhalation, property loss. But none of them answered the question that kept burning in my mind. Why did Rick tell me to run? One afternoon, I went back to the site with an officer named Daniels. He was young, polite, with kind eyes that made me trust him more than I should have. "I know this is hard, Mrs. Miller," he said softly, leading me toward the remains of the porch. "But if you remember anything unusual before the fire, it could help." I hesitated. Should I tell him about the dream? No, he'd think I was crazy. So instead, I said, "There were noises sometimes from the basement. I thought it was the heater." He nodded and made a note on his clipboard. "Anyone have access down there besides you?" I shook my head. "Brandon did, and Ashley. They were living here too." He paused. "Did you notice anything out of place recently?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say I'd felt out of place in my own home. But instead I just whispered, "No, nothing." That night, I found myself thinking about the basement. Rick used to keep all his tools down there. After he died, I barely went inside. The smell of sawdust and oil made me miss him too much. But a few weeks before the fire, Ashley had gone down there often. She said she was reorganizing. At the time, I didn't question it, but now, the word reorganizing echoed in my mind like a riddle. Grace came to visit the next day. She brought homemade soup and a little framed picture of Rick from our wedding day. "You always said he looked handsome in this one," she smiled gently. I smiled too, but my chest felt heavy. Looking at his face brought everything back. The dream, the warning, the cold night air on my skin. "Grace," I said softly, "do you believe people can come back, even for a moment?" She looked at me for a long time before answering. She smiled. "I think love never really leaves, Karen. Sometimes it finds a way to reach us when we need it most." Her words made my throat tighten, because I realized maybe that's exactly what Rick did. A few days later, I got a call from Officer Daniels. "Mrs. Miller," he said, "we've finished our initial report. Would you like to come by and see it?" I agreed. At the station, he showed me the papers, pointing to highlighted sections. "The official cause will likely be labeled as accidental, gas ignition near the basement heater." Gas ignition. Basement heater. I frowned. "That heater wasn't working," I said. "It hasn't been for months." He paused. "That's strange," he said. "The fire started right next to the main valve. Someone must have—" He stopped himself. "Someone must have what?" I asked. He hesitated. "Turned it on. Recently." I stared at him. He quickly changed the subject, but it was too late. The thought had already taken root. Someone turned it on. That night, I called Brandon. "Hey, Mom," he answered, his voice flat, tired. "I speak in Hara. Hey, sweetheart, I spoke with the police today." He went quiet. Then carefully, "Oh, what did they say?" "They think it was a gas leak." "Yeah," he said. Quickly, "that's what they told us too. Must have been old pipes." "Maybe," I said softly. "But Brandon, the heater wasn't working, remember?" Silence. Then he said, "Mom, I really don't want to talk about this right now. We've lost enough already." Before I could reply, he hung up. The next morning, Lyndon knocked on my door holding her phone. "You need to see this," she said, her face pale. It was a local news article. "Fire destroys family home. No injuries reported." Nothing unusual at first glance, until I scrolled down. There was a picture of Ashley. She was smiling, standing beside Brandon outside a small, new-looking house with the caption, "New beginnings for a couple." New beginnings. I felt my stomach twist. The date on the photo was from 2 days after the fire. I didn't tell anyone what I felt that day. That cold realization that my son and his wife had already moved on. While I was still picking ashes out of my hair, they were taking photos for the paper. Something was terribly wrong. 2 weeks later, I went to visit them. Their new house was smaller but clean and modern, like something from a catalog. Ashley opened the door with her usual smile. "Karen, you look well. Come in." Her voice was sweet, but her eyes, they were sharp, watching me, measuring me. I stepped inside. Brandon appeared from the kitchen, avoiding my gaze. "Hi, Mom," he murmured. I looked around. Everything looked new, expensive. "Nice place," I said. Ashley beamed. "Yes, well, we figured it was time to have our own space." "Of course," I said quietly. "When did you decide that?" "Oh," she said casually, "a few weeks ago, before the fire." Before the fire. My hands trembled slightly. I folded them together to hide it. At dinner, Ashley kept the conversation light, but I could feel her eyes on me every time I looked away, like she was making sure I wasn't asking the wrong questions. When Brandon went to take out the trash, she leaned closer and whispered, "You're lucky, you know?" I looked up. "Lucky?" She smiled, thin and cold. "Some people lose everything. You still have your life." Her words chilled me more than the night wind outside. Before I could respond, Brandon came back in, and she smiled sweetly again, like nothing happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. Linda's guest room felt too quiet. I kept hearing Rick's voice in my head, "Run." But this time, it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a reminder. He wanted me to live, but he also wanted me to know. The next day, I went to the fire department to ask for a copy of the final report. The officer hesitated, but eventually handed me a folder. Inside were photos. Charred beams, melted metal. And then one that made my breath stop. A small red gas can, half melted, found near the basement steps. It wasn't ours. Rick had stopped using gas for his tools years ago. Someone brought it there. Someone planned it. I left the building and sat in my car for a long time. The world outside kept moving. People walking, cars passing, life going on. But inside me, everything was still. That gas can wasn't just evidence. It was proof. Rick's dream, his warning. It all made sense now. That night, I called Brandon again. "Brandon," I said softly, "I need to see you. Tomorrow. Just the two of us." He hesitated. "Ashley has work." "I know," I said. "Just you." After a long silence, he agreed. He came the next afternoon. I'd made coffee, set out his favorite cookies, the kind I used to bake when he was little. He looked tired, older somehow. "Mom," he said, sitting down, "what's this about?" I took a deep breath. "Do you remember the gas heater in the basement?" He froze. His fingers tightened around the mug. "Why?" I said, "The police found something. A gas can. It wasn't ours." He swallowed hard. "Mom, I need you to tell me the truth, Brandon." My voice stayed calm, though my heart raced. "Did you or Ashley do anything down there before the fire?" He looked away. The silence stretched. Finally, he whispered, "She said it would be fast, that you'd be asleep, that no one would get hurt." The world tilted. "What?" I whispered. Tears welled in his eyes. "I didn't know she'd actually do it. I swear, Mom. She said she just wanted insurance money, that it would look like an accident." My voice broke. "And you let her?" He buried his face in his hands.
I thought she was joking. I didn't believe her.
I couldn't speak. My throat ached, my hands trembled, but my voice, when it came, was steady. "Brandon," I said softly, "get out." He looked up, shocked. "Mom, get out." I repeated, quieter, "before I start to hate you." He stood slowly, tears streaking down his face. "Mom, please, I didn't." "Go," I whispered. He left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. And I sat there, staring at the empty chair, the untouched cookies, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Rick had saved me from the fire. Now, it was my turn to save the truth. That night began like any other. Quiet, still, the kind of quiet that presses on your ears. Brandon and Ashley had gone out to dinner with some friends. I'd cooked myself a small bowl of soup and watched an old movie in the living room, something from the 70s. One of those films Rick used to love, with grainy colors and soft music. For a few hours, everything felt almost normal. Almost. But as the clock ticked closer to midnight, a strange heaviness settled in the house, like the air itself was holding its breath. The rain had started outside, tapping lightly against the windows. I remembered thinking how peaceful it sounded, until the power flickered. Once, twice, then went completely out. The entire house plunged into darkness. I sat there, my heart thumping. The silence after the power died was deafening. "Brandon?" I called out softly, even though I knew they weren't home. No answer. I tried to stand, but something inside me told me to stay still. And then I felt it. A chill. Not a normal cold. Something else. Like someone had just opened a door to the outside, but no wind came through. And in that moment, I smelled it. His cologne. Rick's cologne. The same one I'd buried him with. My throat went dry. I turned my head slowly toward the hallway. The faint shape of a man was standing there. Tall, familiar shoulders, the outline of his favorite jacket. "Rick?" My voice came out as a whisper. He didn't move closer, didn't speak, just stood there, his face half in shadow. Then, softly like a gust of wind brushing my ear, I heard it. "Run." One word, deep, urgent, full of fear. My breath caught. I froze, gripping the armrest of the couch. "Run." This time, louder, sharper. I didn't think. I just moved. I grabbed my coat from the rack, my shoes from the floor, but I didn't even manage to put them on. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped them. I don't remember locking the door. I don't even remember opening it. All I remember is the rain hitting my face as I stepped outside, barefoot, cold, wet, confused, and running. I ran down the street like a child chased by shadows. My feet slapped against the pavement, the rain soaking my nightgown. My breath came in gasps. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away. Away from the house, away from the voice that had just saved me or terrified me. I couldn't tell which. After a few blocks, I stopped under a streetlight, clutching my chest. My feet were bleeding, small cuts from the gravel. A car slowed down. A woman's voice called out from the window, "Ma'am, are you okay?" It was Linda, my neighbor. She lived 2 streets over. When she saw me, she gasped. "Karen, my God, what happened to you?" I I don't know, I stammered. "I just had to leave." She looked at me like I was out of my mind. But Linda had known me for 20 years. She didn't ask too many questions. "Come on, honey, let's get you dry," she said, helping me into her car. She wrapped me in a blanket and sat me by her fire. I told her bits and pieces, the dream, the voice, the smell of Rick's cologne. Linda listened quietly, her eyes soft with worry. "Maybe it was just your nerves," she said gently. "You've been under so much stress with Ashley and all." "Maybe," I whispered. But in my gut, I knew better. We both tried to laugh it off. But even Linda admitted she'd seen strange things before. I spent the night there, in her guest room. The rain didn't stop. I remember lying in that bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart refusing to calm down. And then, at some point, exhaustion took me. I fell asleep. When I woke up, the world had changed. Linda was standing in the doorway. Her face was pale. Her voice shook as she said, "Karen, you need to come see this." I followed her to the living room. The TV was on. News. Smoke. Fire trucks. Sirens. And then I saw it. My house. Or what was left of it. Blackened wood. Collapsed roof. Nothing but ash and smoke. The reporter's voice said something about an overnight fire and no survivors found inside. My knees gave out. I fell onto the floor. Linda grabbed me. "Oh my God, Karen!" I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Rick had saved me. If I had stayed, I would have died in that fire. Hours passed in a blur. Police came. Firefighters questioned me. They wanted to know where I'd been, what time I left, if I'd seen or heard anything unusual. I told them about the power going out, about the dream, about Rick. They exchanged looks but didn't say much. The fire chief said it might have been caused by faulty wiring, but he looked uncertain. Something about the way the flames had spread didn't make sense. He said they'd found traces of an accelerant, gasoline. Someone had poured it inside the house. My stomach twisted. "Do you think—" I began, but I couldn't finish. He just shook his head. "We'll investigate," he said. But deep down, I already knew. Ashley. The next few days were a blur of smoke, paperwork, and grief. Brandon came to see me, alone. His eyes red, his voice shaky. "Mom," he said, taking my hands, "I'm just glad you're alive." I wanted to hug him, to hold my son, but something in me hesitated. "Where's Ashley?" I asked softly. She's at her friend's," he said quickly. "She's not taking it well." I nodded, but his tone was too flat, too rehearsed. Later, when he wasn't looking, I overheard him on the phone. "Yeah, they said it started near the kitchen. No, I didn't smell anything before we left. Yes, I'll stick to the story." Stick to the story. That phrase haunted me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by Linda's window staring at the smoke still rising from the distance. Rick's voice echoed in my mind. Run. He hadn't been warning me of an accident. He'd been warning me of them. And as I sat there in the dark, my fear slowly turned into something else. Resolve. They thought I was weak. They thought I wouldn't fight back. But Rick had given me a second chance, not just to live, but to see the truth. And I would use it. The next morning I went to the ruins. The air still smelled of smoke and charred wood. I walked slowly, stepping over the debris, my heart pounding. Near the kitchen, I saw something half buried under ash, a melted gas can, and just beside it, Ashley's charm bracelet. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand, her initials still faintly visible. She'd been there. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady when I whispered to the empty air, "Thank you, Rick," because I finally understood what had really happened and who had done it, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. The morning after I found the bracelet, the fog outside was so thick I could barely see the road. It felt fitting. Everything in my life had become foggy too, unclear, shadowed by lies. Linda drove me to the police station. She wanted to come inside, but I asked her to wait in the car. I needed to do this alone. The officer at the desk recognized me right away. "Mrs. Miller, we're very sorry for your loss." I nodded. My voice was steady when I said, "I found something at the scene. I think it might help your investigation." I handed over the small evidence bag I'd prepared, the melted gas can nozzle I'd picked up carefully using a towel, and Ashley's bracelet. The officer took one look at the bracelet and frowned. "Where exactly did you find this?" "In the kitchen, near the stove," I said. He exchanged a look with another detective. They both seemed suddenly alert. I didn't press. I just said softly, "That bracelet belonged to my daughter-in-law." He scribbled something down. "We'll check for fingerprints. We'll be in touch." And that was it. Simple words, but I knew I had just set something in motion. When I walked back to the car, Linda's eyes searched mine. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing yet, but something will." For the next few days, I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rick, standing there in that doorway, whispering, "Run." Now I understood. He hadn't been telling me to escape forever. He'd been giving me time to see. And what I saw now was crystal clear. Ashley wasn't just manipulative. She was dangerous. All her false kindness, all her little jabs, all her quiet cruelty, it had been leading to something. She wanted me gone, completely. A week after the fire, the detectives called me back. They'd found gasoline residue inside the kitchen walls, the garage, even the hallway leading to my bedroom. It wasn't faulty wiring. It was arson. They asked if I knew anyone who might have reason to set the fire. I hesitated for a moment. Then I said, "Ashley Miller, my daughter-in-law." The words came out calm, almost too calm. They looked surprised. "Can you tell us why you believe that?" one of them asked. So I told them everything. About how she'd been pushing me out of the house, how she'd made sure I signed certain insurance papers for convenience, how she always talked about needing a fresh start. The younger detective took notes, his brow furrowed. "Do you have any proof of these insurance changes?" I smiled faintly. Yes. She made me sign them at the kitchen table. I have a copy in my personal file box, the one she forgot I kept at the library storage locker. Their eyes widened slightly. I gave them the key. By the time I returned home to Linda's, I felt something new inside me. It wasn't anger. It was peace, mixed with purpose. Rick had always told me I had a quiet strength. You're soft, but you're steel underneath, he used to say. Now I understood what he meant. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to scream for justice. I was just going to wait and let the truth do the shouting for me. A few days later, Brandon showed up. He looked thinner, worn out. "Mom," he said, standing in the doorway. "Can we talk?" I nodded and invited him in. He sat at Linda's kitchen table, hands trembling around his coffee mug. "I don't even know what to say," he murmured. "Everything's a mess." "Then say what's true," I said softly. He looked up, his eyes tired. "Ashley told me the fire was an accident, that maybe you left something on the stove." I stayed silent, let him continue. "But the police came by this morning," he said. "They're asking questions about her insurance claims, about things I didn't even know existed." I tilted my head slightly. "Insurance claims?" He swallowed hard. "There was a life insurance policy in your name. The beneficiary was me, but she helped file it, and she's been asking about payout dates." My heart squeezed painfully. My son, my sweet, foolish son. He wasn't evil, just blind. Blind to the woman who'd been wrapping him in her web. "Brandon," I said quietly, "do you think your father would want this for us? Lies? Secrets? Money?" He shook his head slowly, tears forming in his eyes. "No, Mom, he wouldn't." Then he whispered, "I think Dad's trying to tell us something." I felt tears prick my eyes. "He already did," I said. That same evening, the police called. They'd matched fingerprints on the gas can to Ashley. There was no denying it now. They found text messages, too. Messages she'd sent to someone about making sure the house goes up clean and it'll all be worth it. It was surreal hearing those words spoken aloud. The detectives thanked me for my patience. They said they'd take care of the rest. And they did. Ashley was arrested 2 days later. The official charge? First-degree arson and attempted homicide. When the news broke, Brandon collapsed. He cried like a child, head in his hands. I wanted to hold him. I wanted to say everything would be okay. But all I could do was rub his back and whisper, "You'll heal, son. It'll take time, but you'll heal." Because deep down, I knew I wasn't just comforting him. I was comforting myself. Weeks passed. The investigation turned into court hearings. I went to every one, sat in the back, watched quietly. Ashley never looked at me. Not once. But one afternoon, as they played security footage showing her buying gasoline at a hardware store the night of the fire, she glanced over her shoulder, just for a second. And I saw it, the flicker of disbelief, like she couldn't understand how I'd survived. I met her eyes, didn't smile, didn't glare, just looked at her the way you look at someone you finally see clearly. She looked away first, That was enough for me. After the verdict, guilty on all counts, the reporters tried to talk to me. They wanted statements, sound bites, emotional lines. I didn't give them any. I simply said, "My husband warned me in a dream, and I listened." They laughed a little, the way people do when they think you're speaking in metaphors. But I wasn't. Rick had saved me, not through fire or fury, but through love that refused to fade. And now that love had given me peace. A few days later, I visited what remained of the house one last time. The police tape was gone. The land was quiet. The smell of smoke had faded, replaced by the faint scent of grass and earth. I knelt down where the kitchen used to be, closed my eyes. "I did it, Rick," I whispered. "The truth came out. She can't hurt anyone else now." A soft breeze brushed past me, carrying the faintest trace of that cologne again. For the first time since that night, it didn't make me cry. It made me smile. I felt like he was saying, "You're safe now." When I stood up, I realized the sun was setting, orange and gold across the sky. And for the first time in months, I felt light. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had survived. Rick had given me the warning, but I had done the rest. I had faced the fire and walked through it. That night, I went home, or what was home now, Linda's spare room, with its soft blankets and old lavender lamp. Before I went to bed, I took out an old photo of Rick and me. He was smiling, his arm around me, his eyes full of that same warmth I still remembered. I whispered, "Thank you." Then I placed the photo on the nightstand and turned off the light. And for the first time since the fire, I slept without fear. It's strange, you know? When the dust finally settles and the noise fades away, you expect relief to come rushing in all at once. But it doesn't. He hadn't been warning me of an accident. He'd been warning me of them. And as I sat there in the dark, my fear slowly turned into something else. Resolve. They thought I was weak. They thought I wouldn't fight back. But Rick had given me a second chance, not just to live, but to see the truth. And I would use it. The next morning I went to the ruins. The air still smelled of smoke and charred wood. I walked slowly, stepping over the debris, my heart pounding. Near the kitchen, I saw something half buried under ash, a melted gas can, and just beside it, Ashley's charm bracelet. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand, her initials still faintly visible. She'd been there. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady when I whispered to the empty air, "Thank you, Rick," because I finally understood what had really happened and who had done it, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. The morning after I found the bracelet, the fog outside was so thick I could barely see the road. It felt fitting. Everything in my life had become foggy too, unclear, shadowed by lies. Linda drove me to the police station. She wanted to come inside, but I asked her to wait in the car. I needed to do this alone. The officer at the desk recognized me right away. "Mrs. Miller, we're very sorry for your loss." I nodded. My voice was steady when I said, "I found something at the scene. I think it might help your investigation." "Brandon," I said softly, "forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means you stop letting the pain decide who you are." He stared down into his tea. "How do you do it? After everything she did?"
I smiled faintly, because holding on to hate keeps me tied to her, and I've lived enough of my life under her shadow. He nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. We sat there a while longer, watching the wind move through the trees. And in that stillness, I think both of us let go of something. A few days later, I decided to visit Grace, my old friend from the community center. She'd heard what happened, but hadn't seen me since before the fire. When she opened the door, her eyes filled with tears. "Karen," she whispered, pulling me into a hug. "Oh, honey, I've been praying for you." Her house smelled like cinnamon and old books. It felt like warmth itself. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. She told me about her grandchildren, about the new pastor, about how time has a way of healing things, even when you don't want it to. At one point, she looked at me closely and said, "You know, Rick was always so proud of you. He used to say, 'Karen doesn't just survive, she shines.'" That made me smile and cry a little. Because even after all these years, hearing his name said with love still made my heart ache. But not the painful kind anymore. It was the kind of ache that reminds you you've truly lived. When I left Grace's house, the sky was turning orange. The world looked softer somehow, gentler. And I realized something. Revenge hadn't brought me peace. Truth had. Finding out what happened, seeing justice done, it mattered. But the real healing came from understanding that Rick's warning wasn't just about saving my life. It was about saving my soul. If I'd stayed angry, if I'd let the bitterness consume me, I would have lost myself even after surviving the fire. But Rick didn't just want me alive, he wanted me whole. One evening, as I was watering Linda's plants, she came outside with 2 cups of lemonade. "You ever think about rebuilding?" she asked gently. I thought about it for a while before answering. "No," I said finally. "I think some places are meant to rest." She nodded, understanding. "So, what will you do instead?" I smiled. "Maybe start small. Help at the community kitchen again, maybe teach a few classes, maybe just live quietly." "That sounds like you, Karen." We clinked our glasses, watching the fireflies flicker across the yard. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at home, not in a house, but in my heart. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear Rick's voice. Not words, just a feeling, like a gentle echo. It doesn't scare me anymore. It comforts me. Because I know he's not haunting me. He's waiting, somewhere peaceful, where the fire can't reach. And one day, when it's my time, I'll see him again. Until then, I'll keep living, not because I have to, but because he wanted me to. There's something I've learned through all of this. Life isn't about avoiding the pain. It's about trusting the warning signs, even when they come from places you don't understand. Sometimes love follows you beyond the grave. Sometimes it whispers, "Run," not to make you flee, but to help you find your way back to yourself. Rick's warning wasn't a curse. It was a gift. Because of him, I'm here. Because of him, the truth came out. Because of him, I finally learned what strength really means. It isn't loud. It isn't cruel. It's quiet, patient, soft, like the way he used to hold my hand. If I could speak to anyone listening now, I'd say this. When your heart tells you something is wrong, listen.
When love comes to you in strange ways, through dreams, through memories, through the quiet voice in your chest, don't ignore it. Sometimes that's the universe trying to protect you. Sometimes it's someone you loved refusing to let you fall. And when you make it through the fire, don't just be grateful. Be alive. Live. Love. Heal. Because the greatest revenge against cruelty is peace. And the strongest answer to death is life. That night before bed, I looked at Rick's picture one last time. "Good night," I whispered. "I'm okay now." And in the quiet of the room, I felt it, that gentle warmth around me again, like a final embrace. I closed my eyes, a small smile on my face, and let sleep take me. Safe. At peace. Alive.